Several different types of dungeons started appearing when the human world got connected to the game world's dimension gate. Thanks to the system's help, many humans were awakened as players to fight against the dungeon monsters, but those who were given powers got greedy and started robbing the dungeon's resources, resulting in the demon named Lord Adesali along with Abyss-ranked dungeons appearing. In order to defeat Adesali and the Abyss-ranked dungeon, the strongest players, led by Liu Yi, prepared to counterattack. However, Adesali was already prepared for the attack and ordered his companions to eliminate all the humans and leave none alive. As the fight between the two commenced, Adesali began shitting on those weakling humans when suddenly, the demons in front of him got obliterated by an attack he managed to block. Adesali wondered who it was this time, and Liu Yi praised him for being so powerful, telling him to receive justice's judgment. Adesali yelled at him to shut his trap and dashed towards him, resulting in the two of them crossing blades. As the battle continued, Liu Yi soon got to know why Adesali is known as the strongest demon. Adesali completely overwhelmed the cocky human and threw him onto the ground, causing Liu Yi to receive a hell lot of damage. He then called Liu Yi a pathetic loser and raised his sword to end his life for good. Liu Yi's life started flashing in front of his eyes until his men screamed at Adesali to let Liu Yi go, or the demons they had captured would be seeing an even greater hell than the one they were born in. Liu Yi used this chance to stab Adesali with his weapon, making Adesali question Liu Yi if threatening his family members is the justice he speaks of. But Liu Yi lets him know that in a battle of life and death, a slight hesitation can be deadly. This causes Adesali to get out of control and tell Liu Yi to die with him, followed by him exploding right in front of Liu Yi. With that being said, the Abyss dungeon had been cleared and Adesali was defeated, but sadly, the humans didn't find Liu Yi in the very best conditions either. 10 years later at the dungeon named Burial Area, a hot blondie is leading her men in a dungeon raid when unexpectedly, one of the players gets crushed by obese suture monster. That monster then begins targeting and eliminating all the other players as well, and the girl figures that they have just entered the dungeon, and it won't be good if everyone ends up losing their life. This makes her ask the miners to lure the monster, but when one of them tries to argue that their only job was to collect the materials, a player yells at them to do as they are ordered, and whoever tries to escape will be eliminated. That miner figures that he can increase his level this way, but is unsure how to defeat such a monster himself. The girl realizes that sacrificing those miners will lower their powers the least, and with the last hit, she will be rewarded with most of the experience points. Meanwhile, the miner decides to live for Shio's sake and figures that he only needs to attack the monster's weak points. After noticing the monster's oversized stomach, he begins dashing towards it, only to get hit by a spear thrown by that girl who was trying to deal some damage to that monster. As the miner lays on the ground, injured, thinking about his sister, Shio, the monster lifts its weapon and slams it on the miner, causing him to lose his life. Suddenly, a bright light strikes his corpse, allowing his heart to start functioning again. The girl, along with another player, looks at the miner as he stands up again, talking about how he is reborn on Earth and in a player's body. Following that, he notices the monster lunging towards him, and without wasting a second, rips apart his fat belly, eliminating the monster and receiving 2,000 experience points. Everyone is surprised to see the so-called miner eliminate the monster, while the girl begins blaming him for stealing her experience points. On the other hand, he notices that he has leveled up to level 5 and is surprised to see the system for the first time. Additionally, he is also given special authority by the system, and as it turns out that it's none other than Adesali who took over that miner's body. Suddenly, a new skeleton monster appears and begins attacking the players, but they easily manage to block his attacks. Just then, Adesali dashes forward and eliminates the monsters, but gets surprised when it doesn't give him any experience points. Turns out now he can't gain XP by eliminating monsters, and will be receiving Conquer points, which will allow him to unlock new skills and authorities. He then uses the skill named Conqueror's Eye to check the leader's stats, but figures that she's currently too strong for him to handle and begins kissing by providing her a power potion. He plans to eliminate her after gaining enough Conqueror points, not knowing that she wants to do the same after they deal with the boss. Soon after, a blue flame appears out of nowhere, and Adesali realizes that it's the dungeon monster. The blue flame then spreads across the area and a skeleton dragon emerges from it. The leader yells at everyone to maintain formation as they need to work together. However, Adesali doesn't plan to fight that thing and runs away. enraging the leader as she mentions how he'd be the next to die. The dragon begins attacking them using its flames, and while blocking those flames, the players begin counterattacking. These attacks deal a ton of damage, causing the dragon to expose its core, and seeing this, Adesali decides to make his appearance. The players start running towards the dragon to target the core when suddenly, the dragon's flames envelop out their bodies. Realizing that close combat isn't working, the players start using long range attacks, but the dragon easily blocks the attacks, making the leader panic and nothing seems to work against it. Taking advantage of this situation, Adesali dashes towards the dragon, making the baddie with a bad personality happy as he'd lose his life. But when the dragon tries attacking Adesali with its leg, he easily manages to push it away, which comes as a surprise to the leader. Adesali mentions that the dragon exposing its core is nothing but a trap, and that those dumb players fell into the trap from the beginning. Apparently, during the first phase, the dragon spreads flames that add buff to players, and during the second phase, its core spreads another type of flame that can detonate that buff. The trick is to stay away from the dragon during that first phase, and by doing that, Adesali easily manages to land his attacks on the dragon and ultimately end its life, remembering how he used to target them when he was younger. This gives him some more Conqueror points, allowing him to unlock a new authority named the Dungeon Bind. After he uses it to bind the dungeon, a ton of hidden abilities are revealed when, out of nowhere, the leader attacks him with her bows and they explode upon impact. Seeing the explosion makes her think that she was able to end his miserable life, and then orders her men to proceed with their plan to unlock the hidden dungeon. This results in them attacking the other players to use them as offerings. One of them begs her for his life, but he couldn't care less as there must be sufficient players' death to unlock the hidden dungeon, but even after eliminating several of the players, the hidden dungeon doesn't seem to appear. Meanwhile, Adesali, who is perfectly fine, begins lunging towards her men and begins slashing them down one by one, which comes as a surprise to her. Eliminating players gives Adesali some XP, making him realize that eliminating players is the only way to gain it. Simultaneously, the leader named Andalia uses her skill to check Adesali's stats and can't believe that he is still only a level 5 player. Seeing this makes her confident, and she orders her men to eliminate him. A level 10 player named Lurin dashes towards Adesali to end his life, but Adesali uses his lighting attribute to attack Lurin and paralyze his body. This allows Adesali to flawlessly land an attack, but Lurin doesn't give up and tries attacking Adesali once again, but Adesali easily stops his weapon with one hand. With that being said, Adesali puts an end to Lurin's life and gains 1000 XP as a reward. While Andalia can't believe how a level 5 could eliminate a level 10, Adesali figures that with so much XP, he can try his newly unlocked abilities. Andalia orders her men to attack together, saying that if they cooperate enough, eliminating him will be child's play. Meanwhile, Adesali notices that he has obtained a strong passive power buff, and that he can spend his Conqueror points to learn new skills. Currently, he has spent 200 points to bind the dungeon and another 50 to learn the lighting attribute, which leaves him with 50 points. Realizing that the enemies have an advantage in numbers, he decides to use his remaining points wisely. He notices a monster summoning skill and decides to buy it. Just when Andalia is about to attack him, she witnesses several monsters gathering around him, while Adesali realizes that these monsters can only be used at the binded dungeon. Andalia can't believe that a bottom feeder like Adesali has such an overpowered skill and decides to use her trump card, which is a historical rank item she was saving to use against the hidden dungeon's boss. While Adesali is trying to figure out the purpose behind the flute in her hand, several deadly monsters start to appear out of nowhere and attack the monsters that Adesali previously summoned. Andalia mentions that Adesali's monsters are nothing in front of her beast army, which makes him ask Andalia if she thinks weak monsters are the only thing he controls. Suddenly, the dragon flies over her, burning all her beast monsters using its flames and landing behind Adesali, making him look like some big shot. Andalia can't believe that he can control the dungeon boss as well and tells Adesali that if he eliminates her, he will die as well. Furthermore, she mentions that their party came to raid the dungeon under the Blood Race Guild's leader, Lord Stockton's orders, who is level 40. But Adesali couldn't care less and plans to eliminate anyone who tries blocking his path. But Andalia argues, advising him to not look down on him, as he is the cousin of the person who participated in eliminating Lord Luoyi. Hearing this makes Adesali even more enraged, as he orders the dragon to eliminate her, resulting in the dragon frying her to a crisp. After eliminating her, Adesali receives 5,000 X-Men levels up to level 10, but before he can celebrate properly, the ground beneath him starts shaking along with a notification of sacrifice players reaching the required amount. With that being said, the gate of the hidden dungeon appears in front of Adesali. He figures that there must be some rare equipment inside of it when a pop-up, warning him about the dungeon being extremely dangerous, appears. Knowing that he is currently the most dangerous presence there can be, Adesali decides to enter the dungeon and claim all the items. Before entering the hidden dungeon, Adesali notices that his equipment is pretty weak and decides to change into something stronger before entering. Knowing that players always loot items after eliminating monsters, he decides to do the same and orders his monsters to gather all the armor from the players' corpses. After leaving nothing but their boxers on the players, the monsters come up to Adesali with all the loot they managed to gather. Luckily, Adesali is able to wear all their equipment and decides to store the remaining ones in his inventory for future usage. With that being said, he is ready to enter the dungeon and finally steps inside, soon realizing that the castle he stepped inside looks pretty familiar. This reminds Adesali that his whole territory was turned into a dungeon that was later raided by the players, and the dungeon monsters that appeared at the dungeon might have come from the world he was in before. Furthermore, as the hidden dungeon doesn't belong to his binding area, the summoned monsters can't be used inside. Suddenly, the stone statues guarding a door begin to move, and seeing their status makes Adesali realize that they are level 40, much stronger than any of the foes he has witnessed after awakening. Just then, the gate they are guarding opens on its own, and both the guards kneel down, welcoming him and allowing him to pass through, making Adesali wonder if there are some traps waiting for him. But he couldn't care less about anything, as he isn't scared of those pesky little beings to begin with. After entering the room, he dashes forward with only one thing in mind, which is to clear the dungeon and obtain the rare item waiting for him. However, he still remains vigilant, as the monsters inside can be powerful, considering the guards are even 30 levels above him. There, a ton of monsters hiding in the shadows lunge at him unexpectedly, but Adesali manages to move away and dodge their attack. Each of those monsters is level 15 and begins threatening Adesali, and he recognizes them from the Undying race of monsters. Nonetheless, Adesali is not scared in the least and begins dashing toward them, slashing all of those who stand in his way effortlessly. Some of them try to shoot long Ronge attacks on Adesali, but he easily manages to dodge their attacks and counterattacks using his lighting attribute, eliminating all of them and gaining Conqueror points in the process. After eliminating them all, Adesali seems grateful for the passive skill that allowed him to deal with all those small fries. After defeating those monsters, Adesali is yet again confronted by another demon, who confronts him for breaking the seal set on her by her lord. Without hesitation, Adesali attacks the demon with a fireball that explodes on impact, and the only reason he did that was to test the gap between him and a level 40 demon. As expected, the baddie demon comes out of the fire unscratched and mocks him for trying to hurt her with such a pathetic and weak attack. Without wasting a single second, she disappears and reappears on top of him. Before Adesali can even react, she uses her powers to land a brutal blow on Adesali that makes him go flying away, and even when he manages to get a hold of himself, blood begins coming out of his mouth. This makes him realize that the gap is too big between the two of them, and simultaneously, the demon dashes towards him to land another attack and jumps in the air, followed by her targeting his abdomen using all her strength, causing him to receive all the damage and crash into the nearby pillar. Afterward, she mentions how it's been a long time since she drank some blood, and Adesali begins smiling, knowing that it's not the end of the battle. That demon then begins sucking his blood and suddenly realizes something. She instantly steps back in surprise and wonders if he truly is who she thinks he is. Adesali replies that blood race-sucking blood can reveal the target's memory, making the demon realize that the person in front of her is none other than Adesali himself. Without wasting a second, she throws herself in his lap like a puppy seeking attention, reminding Adesali how annoying she used to be. Apparently, 200 years ago, this demon used to stalk Adesali in order to get a glimpse of his monstrous sausage. In the end, he decided to seal her away and promised to unseal and marry her 100 years later. The reason the castle looked so familiar to him is because he made it himself to begin with. Even though he had intended to keep her sealed away, things turned out a bit differently. Adesali asks the demon to stay away from him and questions if she already knows why he is there, after sucking his blood. This results in the demon being enraged at those humans, asking Adesali to let her take revenge. Adesali asks what she thinks about the fact that he sealed her on purpose and didn't have any plans to keep his promise. But even though that demon is aware of everything, she still likes Adesali as much as she did before. Suddenly, Adesali notices something strange about his body, and a pop-up informs him that he has been infected with the blood race venom. Adesali realizes that even though the venom doesn't affect demons, his human body isn't as strong to bear it. This effect allows Adesali to unlock vampire enhancement that gives him a slight buff in every attribute. That demon reassures Adesali that she will help him clean up those jerks later for sure, making Adesali realize that she can be of use later if he ignores her being down bad for him. Following that, he asks her about the rare item at the dungeon, and after thinking for a while, she remembers something, running away to grab it real quick. It turns out to be a drippy jacket made by the founder vampire. After checking out its stats, Adesali notices that it can give him a ton of buff and comes with an invisible skill. Apparently that demon sees it as nothing but an ordinary jacket, but as a player, he can see all the attributes and abilities of it, making Adesali even more excited about the system. Without any further ado, he equips that jacket, which results in an energy-like force coming out of it and enveloping Adesali's body, ultimately allowing him to wear the jacket and become a drip lord. Additionally, he now has a level 40 subordinate, and with that being said, Adesali decides to exit the dungeon and roam around the human world. While exiting the main castle, Adesali thinks about how the player's world is full of danger, and he should plan a good countermeasure. Meanwhile, an invisible barrier stops the demon from exiting the castle, reminding Adesali that he forgot the most crucial thing. Apparently, he put a barrier in the past to stop the demon from exiting the castle, and the only thing that can remove it is his personal sword, which he currently doesn't have. Nonetheless, he decides to walk away, promising to go back for her later sometime, and the thought of him coming back to save her makes the demon a bit excited, making him decide not to let her out no matter what. Eventually, he exits the hidden dungeon, and the sight of monsters kneeling down reminds him of the time when he used to rule over them. Adesali then remembers how the other players kept saying that his class is a warrior, and notices that all his warrior skills are still locked, but his current level up allows him to unlock the skills of a level 10 warrior. Before exiting the dungeon, he removes the jacket he obtained and thinks about how he will be finally able to take revenge. Outside, many people, including men in black, journalists, item traders, and guild members, are present, who regret not entering the dungeon when there were such good rewards. Ultimately, Adesali comes out of the dungeon and orders the system to close the dungeon gate. This results in the dungeon gate closing and Adesali thinking that he needs to simulate the facade of the dungeon being raided. Suddenly, everyone starts taking photos of the only survivor of the dungeon, and the item traders begin asking him to sell the equipment he got from the dungeon. A party member of Andalia begins to wonder where his people are and begins questioning Adesali about them. Adesali replies that everyone lost their lives, and he was the only one spared because even the dungeon boss felt bad for him. However, he doesn't buy it and asks Adesali if he has the equipment or not, and Adesali replies, asking if he was the one who ordered the captain to eliminate other players. This statement makes him furious, and he is about to attack Adesali but stops right before landing the punch. This is thanks to Stockton, the president of the guild, who apologizes to Adesali and makes his party members walk away. On their way back, he mentions to Stockton that there is something shady about Adesali, but he replies that making a scene in front of that many people along with the game masters is not the right thing to do. However, he agrees that Adesali seems shady and plans to investigate everything about him, ordering him to eliminate anything in the way that can be used against them. Adesali also figures that Stockton will eventually stab him in the back and decides to finish him off later. Afterward, one of the game masters asks Adesali to do a level test, as they need to re-register his level information, making Adesali wonder if this will reveal his boss identity. Furthermore, he notices that the game master is level 45, while the game master is surprised regarding the fact that a level 10 survived the dungeon. Adesali mentions that he also eliminated all the players inside, that the game master takes as a joke. He then questions the game master about what will happen if that is true, to which he replies that game masters are not responsible for such events and hands over a player ID card to Adesali, which makes Adesali realize that he needs to go to dungeons as they are a place outside the law. With that being said, Adesali is now on his way to his body's sister, and he found everything about her from the miner's memories. Adesali is a man of clear gratitude and plans to protect the sister of the person's body he is borrowing. Eventually, he arrives at his house and hears a girl screaming. It turns out that Shio is being harassed by a bunch of players who are there to collect the debt money. They then begin telling Shio to empty the house as it will cover the debt when suddenly, Adesali enters the house and begins counting the number of players present. They start to wonder what Adesali is counting, to which he replies that he's counting the experience he can get by beating their ass. Soon after, those thugs begin to kneel before Adesali because he has already shown them their place. They then begin to apologize to Adesali, and he asks Shio if he should eliminate them. But she tells him not to, making them grateful for her kindness. She tells him to turn a new leaf and stop bullying people, while Adesali thinks about how a local bully like him can be of use to him. He then asks the bully if he knows about the black market, and he agrees, making Adesali open his inventory and take out all the equipment he got from the dungeon raid. Furthermore, he orders them to sell those items on the black market, advising them not to ask questions or they'll die. Adesali then tells them to use the money to clear the debt, and the bully agrees to give the remaining amount back after taking a 5% fee for the effort. Adesali agrees to make the deal only if this remains a secret, and the bully happily accepts the offer and leaves, promising to send the money as soon as he sells them. After they leave, Shio punches Adesali lightly, mentioning how worried she was when it took him longer than expected to come back. Adesali smiles at her and pats her head, apologizing for making her worry and letting her know that no one will bully her as long as he's there. Finally, it's night time. Adesali puts Shio to bed, remembering the warmth of a family again and wondering if any of his family from the past survived. Following that, he puts on his robe once again, along with the mask, as it's time to proceed with the plan. Afterward, he arrives at the location where the dungeon gate is present, realizing that he can grind crazily if this plan somehow works. Adesali then opens the dungeon gate once again as his skills allow him to do so with the binded dungeons. He is aware that it will attract several players, and that his monsters could easily level up by eliminating so many players. Additionally, the monsters eliminating players will give him exp as well. Adesali also sets a one-time revival option for the players, calling it his last act of kindness. Soon after, a white car pulls up near the gate and Adesali figures that it's the people from the association and decides to leave as he has to make breakfast for Shio. The next morning, Adesali calls Shio to eat the breakfast he prepared, but taking one look at the stuff he made, she gets concerned, wondering if what he made can even be called food. She further mentions that he used to be a good cook before, but the standards dropped so much after he became a player. Simultaneously, the thug enters the house, mentioning that he has sold all the things and came to deliver the money. He apparently made a card and transferred all the money, which is about 2 million. Hearing the amount makes Shio overjoyed as they can now finally afford to buy Discord Nitro. Following that, Adesali mentions that he still has to prepare to raid a new dungeon and asks the thug to take care of Shio. He agrees without hesitation, saying that he was born a babysitter. Adesali then asks him to cook Shio some breakfast and prepares to leave when she gives him a hug, asking Adesali not to leave her alone. But Adesali pats her head, telling her to be obedient, and she tells him to come back quickly, to which Adesali replies that he will definitely come back in one piece. With that being said, he walks out, thinking about the Conqueror points he'll get along with the dumbbells who will raid his dungeon. However, everything doesn't turn out according to his plan, as the great Adesali fails during the most crucial step, which is finding a team, as no one agreed to party with a level 10 weakling. The first party he approached called him a burden, while the next one said that they needed a magician and healer instead of a warrior. But when one of their team members introduces a baddie, he instantly lets her join even when she is a warrior. Having no other choice, Adesali sits alone, depressed for being such an awkward loner, when unexpectedly, a team of players invites Adesali to join their team as they are one player short. Without giving it much thought, Adesali instantly agrees to join their team, and they all head out towards the dungeon. Meanwhile, Stockton and his trusty lackey stalk him from afar, talking about one of their men joining their party to eliminate Adesali and steal the equipment that he got from the dungeon he raided yesterday. On their way to the dungeon, Adesali notices that one of their party members is pretty high rank and figures that they have a spy in their team. Eventually, they arrive at the dungeon gate, and reading the name of the dungeon, Adesali realizes that the spy's goal must be to take that one specific item found at this dungeon. After entering the dungeon, the party leader advises everyone to stay vigilant, as the monsters could attack them, telling magicians and healers to stay in the center, as the warriors to protect them. One of the healers tries acting cute in order to make Adesali fall for her, but he couldn't care less. Suddenly, some monsters notice the arrival of players and jump on them, planning to catch the players by surprise. One of the monsters heads towards the healer, and she asks Adesali to help her out, only to find out that he's already running away to the side, which has more monsters. Luckily, the magician manages to save the healer using her fire magic, advising others to protect the healer as well, while the healer is pissed at Adesali for ignoring her. The other party members also continue to fight the lizard men, and Adesali also dashes towards them, knowing that he needs to hide his skills, and decides to use the warrior skills. Following that, he activates a skill named War Cry that shocks both the monsters, making them unable to move. Suddenly, a fire blaze appears out of nowhere and hits the monsters along with Adesali. Fortunately, he manages to block the attack, while the monsters don't live to see another day. This results in Adesali getting enraged at the magician that is responsible for the attack, but all she does is apologize to him, saying that her hand slipped. Even though Adesali is furious enough to rip her to shreds, he calms himself down and forgives her, advising the magician to be careful next time. Following that, the healer begins healing everyone, while Adesali figures that the magician's attack was aimed at him and that maybe Stockton sent her to assassinate him. But the strong guy in their team also seems suspicious, and Adesali hopes he's not on Stockton's side. To stay on the safe side, Adesali decides to unlock all the other skills, and the party leader mentions that they should keep exploring and finish the raid as soon as possible. Afterward, Adesali continues to eliminate the lizard men, and so does the magician, who burns them all using her fire. After taking care of all the monsters on the way, they eventually arrive inside a room that they think could be the boss's room. But Adesali is sure that it isn't and realizes that his party is full of newbie goomers. The guildmaster says that the room seems suspicious, advising everyone to be on guard. Later, the Baldi along with the leader and the magician communicate through eye gestures. The magician then shouts at them to attack and uses earth magic to restrict Adesali's movements, allowing the egghead to attack Adesali, and even when he blocks the attack, the party leader is waiting behind him. Before Adesali can even react, he lands a brutal attack, sending Adesali flying and crashing into the nearby ship. The healer gets confused and asks why they are attacking a fellow player, and the leader advises her to quit yapping if she wishes to live. Meanwhile, Adesali is annoyed by them making sneak attacks when suddenly a whirlpool appears in the water, followed by a level 20 sea catfish emerging. At the same time, Adesali, who is lying on the side, mentions how these guys finally showed their true colors, and before he can expose what their real goal is, the catfish comes rushing towards him and swallows Adesali with a single bite. This makes those three glad as they finish the job, when suddenly Adesali comes out of the fish, ripping off its body, mentioning how they underestimated him and that it's time for revenge. Meanwhile, Stockton asks his guild members if the assassins they sent are reliable, and he agrees, saying that even he is scared of her ability. Stockton argues that Adesali seems to have a mysterious aura, but the lackey is confident that he is no match for her. At the dungeon, Adesali is now surrounded by all three of them, and the healer wonders how he could use magic when he is a warrior. The three of them seem confused as well, and Adesali mocks them for thinking that they can get rid of him with such weak attacks. This results in the shiny head dashing towards Adesali, but before fighting him, Adesali decides to attack and end the life of that annoying emo girl. He is confident that it was enough to eliminate her, and then shifts his focus towards the muscle head, who tries landing an attack on Adesali, but ends up losing the arm he uses for pleasuring purposes. Surprisingly, he manages to come up with a counterattack, and luckily, Adesali manages to block it in time, shocked regarding the fact that his lighting didn't paralyze him. Adesali then notices that he is still fighting after being badly injured and manages to cut his weapon into pieces, followed by an attack that ends his life. Furthermore, Adesali uses his lighting attribute once again and attacks the party leader, who is trying to sneak up on him, but the party leader musters through the pain and manages to hold Adesali, restricting his movements. He then looks at the magician, and Adesali notices her coming out of the fire half burned, making him realize they don't care about their lives. After getting close enough, she self-destructs, which causes a huge explosion and flattens everything nearby. Luckily, Adesali comes out of it alive, realizing that they wanted him to die with them, but fortunately, he had a trump card, which is the fresh vampire jacket he got from that demon earlier. Just then, the healer appears out of nowhere and suggests healing his wounds. While she heals his wounds, Adesali completely ignores her and contemplates the situation when suddenly, he notices that his body has become very stiff. His arms then start moving on their own, and he finally figures that the healer is the one who is controlling his body with her skill. She first teases him for losing control over his body, and mentions that her plan was to control those three and act like a victim. Just when Adesali's own body is about to cut his neck, he yells at the suspicious person to tag along, asking if they're just going to watch the show. Adesali further says that he is aware of the treasure they are searching for. This results in that person unsheathing their sword and finishing off the healer with a single strike, saving Adesali's life, who is glad that they aren't on the enemy side. He then asks that person to remove their mask, as they must have used it to cancel their level. Surprisingly, they agree, saying that it is historical equipment, and removes the armor on their body, revealing a level 80 hottie named Miyamoto. She then threatens Adesali, saying that he better not scam her, to which he replies that she will never be able to find it without his help. After hearing this statement, Miyamoto agrees to believe him only if he names the thing she is searching for, and Adesali instantly mentions the wholehearted sword that goes by the name of Twin Evil Blades that is something he hid himself. Miyamoto gets surprised and is hopeful that Adesali knows where it is. He then asks Miyamoto how much that weapon might be worth, and she replies that it is her profession awakening key, and agrees to do anything he asks her to. However, the lousy idiot is unaware of what awakened profession is, and she lets him know that after level 20, players can change their profession, and it happens once again when the player reaches level 80. Currently, there are only 7 of those who have achieved this feat and are called the 7 heroes. Miyamoto is only one step away from awakening, and Adesali figures that the ones who eliminated his previous self must be among them. With that being said, Adesali tells Miyamoto to follow him, as he will take her to the Twin Evil Blades, and jumps into the water. Having no other choice, she jumps as well, and the two of them swim underwater for a while, and come out on the other side where there are mountains of treasure present. Miyamoto asks him about the Twin Evil Blade, and he begins searching for it as he doesn't remember the exact location. Eventually, he manages to find it and hands it over to Miyamoto, letting her know that the Twin Evil Blade is inside the black cloth wrapped around it. Without wasting any time, Miyamoto begins taking off the cloth and finally touches the blade, while Adesali wonders if he forgot something very important about the blade. Following that, the blade unleashes its power and puts Miyamoto under its spell. At the same time, the ground begins to shake, and Adesali figures that the gatekeeper is still present and alive. Just then, all the treasure is thrown aside, and from the smoke emerges a giant level 40 monster with a sword in hand. Adesali realizes that the level gap is too large for him to fight that thing, and asks Miyamoto to deal with it, but remembers that the blade makes people fall into an illusion, and to tame it, they need to break through. Realizing that he can't rely on Miyamoto for the time being, he decides to fight the monster until she breaks through the illusion space, but isn't so sure if his fragile body can even last that long. Adesali manages to land an attack on the monster, but it doesn't even leave a scratch due to its high defensibility. He then decides to use his skills at max power, and uses a soul lock hook that almost connects, but the monster easily blocks it with his sword like it's nothing. Before Adesali can fully pull back, the monster lunges at him for another attack, and the speed at which it moves surprises Adesali. Luckily, he manages to dodge the sword attack, but the monster takes advantage of its speed and punches Adesali, sending him flying away and reminding him of the level gap between the two of them. Nonetheless, Adesali manages to get back on his feet and realizes that the monster's armor is too tough for him to cut through, which results in him deciding to use his last and most powerful skill. Adesali then begins to power up and prepares to attack, but the monster notices this change, and Adesali attacks with a fire beam to counter it. As Adesali sees its attack rushing toward him, he also activates his skill named Bone Demon Flame and fires it towards the monster. It manages to overwhelm the monster's initial attack and envelops him with blue flames, making Adesali think that this might be enough to take care of the big guy. But he couldn't be more mistaken as the monster attacks through his flames and punches a hole in Adesali's body. This causes Adesali to fall onto the ground with a hole in his body, thinking that this might be the end for him, while the monster raises its sword to put an end to Adesali's life. The players in the other dungeon prepare to fight the dragon boss. Their leader orders them to charge the dragon, reminding them of the rewards. His real plan is to slaughter all his men as sacrifices to open the hidden dungeon, but before he can go through with it, all their bodies begin to burn in purple flames due to the dragon buff, ending all their lives in a split second. Meanwhile, the monster is about to make a Kit Kat out of Adesali when suddenly, the X from eliminating players begins gathering up, allowing Adesali to get back on his feet and block the monster's attack flawlessly. He levels up to level 15 that heals all his wounds, and as he thanks the dead players, the monster begins to crap his pants. Now, with newly increased powers, Adesali is ready for round 2 with the monster. Adesali starts off by trying to slash the monster's arm, and when it doesn't work out, he tries to attack him once again, but the monster's high health and defense makes it impossible to hurt him. Annoyed by the weakling running around his glorious body, the monster goes into berserk mode, making all its attributes increase by 2 times. The monster then comes at Adesali with full force when suddenly he notices Miyamoto running past him and cutting down the monster with a single blow. Surprisingly, she reduces his health to a last hit and gives Adesali the chance to take the glory of ending the monster's life, while wondering if Adesali fought the monster to protect her. Adesali then thanks Miyamoto for the generous offer and ends the monster's life, which grants him 1,000 Conqueror points along with Demon King challenges. Not being familiar with the Demon King's challenges, Adesali decides to take a look and finds out that he can be teleported to a challenge room and will get rewarded if he completes the challenge. Following that, he notices Miyamoto staring at him and wonders if she has fallen for his dull-looking face, but dismisses his thoughts, saying that she only wanted to thank him for the help. He then notices the ton of gold lying around and decides to grab all of it to sell later. As they are about to leave the dungeon, Miyamoto gives Adesali a badge, asking him to come to her house with it if he wants her help, and lastly, makes sure to remind him that he keeps her identity secret. With that being said, the two of them exit the dungeon and Stockton's subordinate, who is waiting for him, gets surprised. Adesali remembers him as Stockton's lackey and asks him to relay a message, saying that he'll be coming for them. Adesali's deep manly voice sent shivers down that man's body, making him realize that even Stockton doesn't give him such a feeling. Elsewhere, one of the players at Stalkers Guild apologizes for not being able to clear the dungeon as it was way too hard for him to handle. The other lackey tells Stockton not to worry, as at least Adesali should be dead by now. Soon after, Stockton receives a call from the other lackey, informing him that Adesali is still alive, and when Stockton tries to confront him for failing the mission, the lackey advises him not to provoke Adesali too much, followed by his resignation. Stockton gets shocked by his lackey hanging up on him and crushes his phone. He then looks at the poor player with eyes full of anger and wastes no time in taking his life. After everything is said and done, he asks the lackey if Adesali has a little sister, and when he agrees, Stockton orders him to capture her and bring her to him alive. Adesali is walking home from the dungeon, thinking about how Stockton won't let him off easily and that he needs to make a counterattack. Furthermore, he wonders if Shio is doing alright, and notices his whole apartment building in shambles, along with his lackey, who is beaten to a pulp by some other players. He calls out Adesali's name, and the other players recognize him as the person they need to take care of. Without wasting any time, he asks them about Shio, and the lackey replies that they took her away, blaming himself for being incompetent. One of Stockton's men tells Adesali to come with them to meet their boss, but Adesali replies that he only needs one to lead the way. Before those guys can even figure out what he said, Adesali dashes towards them and slashes every single one of them into pieces, leaving one of them intact to lead the way. The lackey then begins apologizing for not being able to protect Shio, but Adesali mentions that it's not his fault, realizing that he is quite loyal. However, as Adesali needs to save his sister, he asks the lackey to take care of another job. Elsewhere, the other Stockton's men are waiting for Adesali's arrival when the lifeless body of the person leading the way comes crashing inside, followed by Adesali's arrival. Recognizing them as Stockton's underlings, he asks them about his sister, and they question Adesali about the rare item, asking him to hand it over. But Adesali refuses to negotiate with those who threaten him, resulting in Stockton's men saying that no one's going to save him from getting his ass handed to him. Surprisingly, Adesali finds it convenient to gain so much hex quickly, which causes Stockton's men to dash towards him. Just when one of them is about to attack Adesali with his weapon, Adesali easily manages to dodge the attack and grabbing that person's face, he crushes him onto the ground. The other men then try attacking Adesali, but he uses his fire attribute to launch an attack, causing an explosion and burning them all to a crisp. Even then, the others don't give up and try to jump on Adesali, and he finally takes out his weapon, followed by him slashing them all into pieces. The last remaining one of them begins screaming in agony and begging Adesali to spare his life, but Adesali ends his life, saying that he shouldn't have come after his sister. Meanwhile, Stockton along with his lackeys are watching the battle and his lackey is surprised to witness Adesali's abilities. But Stockton seems to be confident that Adesali can barely keep up with the lackey, and is nothing to be worried about. Furthermore, they have his sister hostage, so he can only do so much. Adesali then notices Stockton and tells him to return Shio, but the lackey turns into a wild beast and jumps down and have a battle with Adesali, saying that he's only alive because he has the thing they want. Adesali tells him to stop wasting any more time and come at him as all of them will be dying anyway. This enrages the lackey even more and he dashes towards Adesali to attack, but Adesali easily manages to block it with his shield, which comes as a surprise to the lackey. Adesali then mocks him for being such a weakling and returns the favor by punching him in the gut. The lackey then laughs at a low-level warrior trying to fight him, and with that being said, both of them rush toward each other and engage in a battle of hand-to-hand combat. The lackey can't believe that Adesali seems to have greater strength than him and gets punched in the face soon after. The arrogant look on Adesali's face pisses off the lackey even more, and he tries attacking back, but Adesali dodges it, landing a perfect punch that sends him flying away. After getting a hold of himself, the lackey wonders how strong Adesali is considering even his beast form can't surpass him. Having no other choice, the lackey decides to go all out and activates primitive power, turning him into an even stronger beast. He then suddenly disappears and reappears behind Adesali, but Adesali easily grabs onto his jaw, saying that he doesn't have much time to waste on a weakling like him. Before the lackey can figure out what's happening, Adesali rips his head off of his body, putting an end to him and challenging the boss Beatty. Stockton is impressed by his skills, saying that if he hands over the item, he will get to replace the lackey's position as his partner. But when Adesali refuses to do so, Stockton mentions how weak humans are when they have someone important to them and shows Adesali the puppet that his elder brother gave him. Inside it is the corpse of a man whose life force was being used by the puppet. Seeing how the life energy of the man has drained, Stockton ends up tossing Shio inside of it as a new power source. This results in the puppet regaining its strength and coming straight after Adesali, attacking him without wasting a second. This makes Stockton curious about which one of the siblings will lose their life first. Sadly, all Adesali can do is block the attack as he doesn't want to hurt Shio, and his simple combat abilities are not enough to defeat it. Adesali continues to block the attacks made by the puppet, and when he tries attacking its head, he fails to damage it and gets counterattacked instead. The fact that Adesali can't fight at his true potential makes him frustrated, and the look on his face makes Stockton even more interested. The puppet then begins consuming more of Shio's energy and tries attacking Adesali while he hesitates to attack back. Just when the puppet is about to land a strike on Adesali, it suddenly is slashed into pieces and Shio comes out of it unscratched and right into Adesali's arms. Stockton can't believe his eyes and realizes that the attack came from the opposite direction. Turns out it is Miyamoto who took care of the puppet and Adesali teases her for barely making it on time. Stockton can't figure out the reason behind Miyamoto's arrival while she reassures Adesali that her attack didn't harm his sister. Furthermore, she asks Adesali if he needs help to eliminate Stockton, making the kid wet himself a little. But Adesali mentions that he handles Stockton himself and asks Miyamoto to take care of his sister, while powering up to take Stockton on his own. Miyamoto lets him know that she will protect Shio and asks him to visit her house after he's done. After she leaves, Stockton calls Adesali arrogant, as that was his only chance to live, while all Adesali can think of is the XP will gain after ending Stockton's life. With that being said, the battle between the two of them commences and both of them give each other a hard time. After taking a short break, The battle continues once again, and Stockton activates his Dark Shadow Assault skill. Seeing this skill makes Adesali realize that his profession is the vampire race. Stockton manages to land a hit, but at the same time, he gets attacked by Adesali's blue flames, making him look like Two-Face from the Batman movies. Adesali figures that flame skills do extra damage to vampire race, while Stockton mocks him for looking down on him. He then activates another skill, named Vampire Race, Engrave and rushes towards Adesali, grabbing his throat and pinning him against the wall, asking if he knows what an instant eliminating looks like. Adesali realizes that he can't break free from Stockton's control, and Stockton begins preparing to end his life. Suddenly, Adesali disappears into thin air, surprising Stockton as his ability is able to detect even invisible targets, but he currently has no clue where he went. Turns out Adesali accepted the challenge mission, which teleported him somewhere else, and now has no choice but to complete the challenge. Just then, a red magic circle appears in the center and begins shining. Soon after, a monster emerges from it along with the challenge to eliminate it. The monster seems pissed, and without wasting a second, it charges Adesali and tries attacking with its weapon. But Adesali manages to block his advance. However, the monster overwhelms Adesali's strength and punches the floor, thinking that it got him good, only for Adesali to appear behind it, calling him a weakling and beheading the monster without being challenged in any way whatsoever. Adesali then figures that the monster must be 25 level at max, and that it's basically a free reward when suddenly the monster begins to regenerate and attaches its head to its body. Adesali can't believe that the monster revived itself, but it doesn't matter to him as Adesali can always eliminate it again without any problem. However, even during the second round, the monster completely regenerates itself, making Adesali a bit annoyed. He then tries burning the monster alive, cutting it into 2 pieces, and even punching a hole in its body, but the end result remains the same as it keeps on regenerating the wounds. While Adesali contemplates this whole situation, the monster manages to land a hit on Adesali, making him wonder if this is a system bug of some sort. Suddenly, the thought of that place being a dungeon hits Adesali's mind, and he begins rushing towards the monster, dodging its initial attack and running past it, while thinking about how he got restricted by his mind. Adesali then punches a hole in the ground, as the dungeon shouldn't only be such a small room. Underground, he finds another monster who seems to be the main body of the monster he was fighting earlier. Deciding to ignore the first monster, Adesali dashes towards the second one and cuts it into 2 pieces, which causes the first monster to melt away as well, allowing him to complete the challenge and be rewarded. Luckily, the reward turns out to be an ability that allows him to summon monsters even outside a dungeon. Outside, Stockton is still wondering how Adesali could have disappeared when suddenly he appears right behind him and almost lands an attack. But Stockton notices him at the last second and manages to block the attack, mocking him for coming back to seek death. However, Adesali lets him know that this time it will be him who's going to kick the bucket. Stockton then tells Adesali that she should have just escaped instead of coming back, saying that it will be the end of him. He then begins dashing towards Adesali, but all Adesali does is smile as something simultaneously attacks Stockton. He is confused as to where the attack came from, and looks to his side, where he witnesses the big fat monster expelling flames from its stomach. Using this chance, Adesali tries to land an attack on Stockton, but he uses his powers to get away from Adesali, wondering if Adesali is a summoner as well. But he soon realizes that a summoner can't use magic or be this strong. But Adesali tells Stockton to worry about himself as several fireballs are headed his way. While getting hit by those fireballs, Stockton notices the monster wizards responsible for the fireballs. After crashing onto the ground, Stockton calls Adesali a coward, telling him to grow some balls and fight alone, but Adesali apologizes, saying that he prefers to beat him up with numbers. At the same time, he summons even more monsters to deal with Stockton, and all of them sprint towards him, but they stand no chance as Stockton easily manages to get rid of them. Seeing how this plan doesn't work, Adesali decides to go with his backup plan and summons the dungeon boss dragon, which shocks Stockton as he didn't expect something like that. The dragon then takes a deep breath and fires blue flames towards Stockton, which he barely manages to dodge, wondering how many cards Adesali is still hiding. But before he gets time to escape, Adesali swiftly cuts his head off of his body, putting an end to the so-called guild leader. However, Adesali realizes that it isn't the end, as he didn't get any rewards, and notices Stockton's body levitating along with his powers, forming a bright red sphere that begins attacking Adesali. He figures that Stockton must be trying to rob his body and hears Stockton's voice, saying that his body shall be his from now on. The only thing Stockton needs to do is destroy Adesali's spirit soul, and he will become the new owner. Meanwhile, Stockton finally enters Adesali's spirit soul world, and he is confident that he'll take over when suddenly he hears a menacing voice, followed by the appearance of Adesali's real form. Stockton is forced to kneel before Adesali, while finding it hard to believe the entity he is seeing in front of him. Adesali then wonders if Stockton just asked him to die, and he begins making excuses, agreeing to even become Adesali's pet dog. However, Adesali crushes Stockton with his hand, saying that he isn't even fit to play the role of his dog. Adesali then gains back control of his body and is rewarded with 50,000 X for eliminating Stockton and levels up to level 18. Suddenly, he feels intense pain in his body and begins to wonder if Stockton is still alive within his body. But it turns out that the vampire bloodline within him is evolving and supplying him powers from all the people he eliminated on the battlefield. Furthermore, 4 new skills are unlocked thanks to this evolution, and all of his equipment has also leveled up, allowing him to even gain control over corpses. He also ends up stealing Stockton's sword and finds out that it is a historical rank weapon. Just then, he notices some people rushing towards him and decides to get out. After he disappears, the game masters appear in the area and are shocked to see all the corpses. The girl tells her leader about everyone who died, including Stalker. The leader then notices the corpse of the lackey who is a member of the Wolf Soul tribe, telling his men to inform the general manager about the news. He further comments that the leader of the Wolf Soul tribe will be furious and might make a move. On the other hand, Stockton's cousin is chilling out with the baddies when he is informed about his cousin's demise. However, he couldn't care less about Stockton, but is furious as someone touching his people means they are indirectly challenging him. The big shot of Game Masters reassures him that he will be taken care of and questions if he really intends to sell that weapon. Stockton's cousin agrees, saying that it is of no use to him as that weapon only recognizes one owner. The big shot then hangs up the phone and looks at that weapon, pitying the fact that no one was able to use it. Following that, Adesali arrives at the Miyamoto mansion and thinks of how it isn't much compared to his old place. Suddenly, the mansion door opens, and a housekeeper named Luo introduces himself, saying that the young master has been waiting for him. Adesali gets shocked seeing that even the butler is level 50 and follows him inside. Lu then appreciates him, helping Miyamoto as their family hasn't had many awakened players after the family head was eliminated by Adesali, and that only 5 players survived that fight. This comes as a surprise to Adesali as he remembers many players surviving the raid. Following that, Luo mentions that he has raised Miyamoto since she was young and lets Adesali know that he won't go easy on someone with ill intentions towards her. This makes Adesali wonder why he is being treated like someone who is eager to get inside her pants. In the hallway, Adesali finally unites with Shio, who gives him a hug, glad to see that her brother is doing well. Adesali asks her not to cry as he took care of everyone who bullied her, and asks her to wait as he has some stuff to discuss with Miyamoto. He then continues following Lu, who mentions Adesali being so close to his sister, to which Adesali replies that he'd eliminate anyone who tries to bully him. Lu seems to like his personality and mentions that they might get along. They eventually arrive at the room, where Miyamoto is waiting, and he enters the room, wondering why she wants to talk alone and whether they have found out about his real identity. Miyamoto, on the other hand, begins blushing, thinking of this meeting as a date, and seeing her red face makes the thick-skulled idiot suppose she is angry because she found out. She finally breaks the ice, asking how they eliminated a level 40 player, but Adesali refuses to go into detail about it. Miyamoto further says that the people he defeated have strong backgrounds, informing him about Louis, who is Stockton's cousin. Adesali replies that he can't find him as he didn't leave any trace behind, to which Miyamoto replies that the Wolf Soul leader can definitely find him. Adesali begins to wonder if it is some kind of dog meat dealer, but Miyamoto elaborates that he is also an awakener, and his profession is Beast God. He has a sharp smell and can deduct anything that happened in a location within a month. Adesali starts to think that he might even smell his fart from miles away when Luo comes running, telling her that Adesali's weapon is being auctioned. Minamoto questions if this news is genuine as Louis had it, and Luo agrees, saying that it will be auctioned 1 month later at the 10th year ceremony of Adesali's demise. Adesali gets pissed over people celebrating his death, while Miyamoto begins to ponder how Adesali must be the only one who could use the sword. This makes Adesali smile as he makes sure to bind his soul to the weapon, and seeing his smile makes Miyamoto think that he might be happy because of what she said. Realizing that there's only 1 month left, Adesali decides to change his profession quickly and take back the sword that belongs to him. Elsewhere, Ahadi is harassed by a pervy musclehead, who wants her to scream louder as it makes him excited. Just then, Adesali appears out of nowhere, mentioning how there is evil wherever he goes. The redhead tells Adesali to F off, but noticing that Guy is a level 25, Adesali gets excited about the XP might get. However, the redhead calls Adesali arrogant, mentioning how he will slice him up, only for his head to be sliced off his body, allowing Adesali to gain 3000 XP. Seeing a decapitated head in front of her, the girl runs away while Adesali notices that he only needs a bit more XP to level up to level 20. Just then, the X from his dungeon begins to appear and allows him to reach level 20 and change his profession. Suddenly, Adesali receives a notification about his dungeon being raided successfully, which causes all his dungeon skills along with his attribute buff to get locked. This makes him furious and wonders who that person could be. Meanwhile, at the dungeon, the dragon is finally defeated, and all the players wonder why they even came along as that person did everything solo. That person named Longin replies that he brought them along to witness his skills, making others realize that he only wanted to flex. Longin levels up to level 20 and can change his profession as well, similar to Adesali. At the same time, a dungeon gate opens in the middle of the city and disrupts the traffic flow. The people nearby begin to wonder if the gate is dangerous when unexpectedly, flames start bursting out of it, causing most of the nearby people and buildings to burn. Elsewhere, the game masters are confused regarding the appearance of this gate and wonder if it is another Adesali standard-like dungeon. Just then, they receive information about it being a profession change dungeon, making them wonder why such a normal dungeon is causing such a commotion. At the same time, all the players eligible for profession change got notified about the dungeon by the system, and apparently, the profession turns out to be a necromancer knight. Instantly, Adesali is on his way to the dungeon, thinking about the necromancer knight skill that has already gone extinct in his world. He decides to seize this opportunity and change his profession into necromancer knight no matter what. Adesali then notices the association surrounding the gate and makes up his mind to slaughter them if they try to get in his way. At the dungeon gate, all the players are arguing with the game master for not letting them in, but he mentions that they only need to defeat him in order to challenge the dungeon. Adesali realizes that normal players are no match for him as he is a level 35 player. One of them with a goofy-ass haircut decides to challenge the game master and tries attacking him head-on, only for the game master to knock him out cold with only one strike. He then asks who's the next challenger and Adesali steps up, but gets mocked by another person who calls Adesali a low-level scum. That person, Shanshin, a level 24 warrior, tells Adesali to go home, making Adesali question if he's seeking death. Surprisingly, the game master recognizes Shanshin as an Iga guild member and allows him to enter. This results in the normal players mumbling about the 7 great guilds getting all the benefits, while Adesali also figures that the game masters want to devour the profession and prevent others from obtaining it. Shanshin further tries mocking Adesali and, as expected, gets his ass handed to him. After crashing onto the ground, Shanshin complains about Adesali to his uncle Chen, causing his uncle to get furious when unexpectedly, Lu appears and asks Chen if he's planning to touch a member of the Miyamoto family. Chen instantly recognizes Lu as the person who eliminated more than 100 enemies during a raid. Eventually, he decides to leave and Shanshin decides to take his revenge inside the dungeon. Lu then mentions that Miyamoto asked her to help Adesali out, and even though he appreciates it, Adesali decides to take the game master himself. The game master says that the gap between the two is too huge, and Adesali tells him to shut his trap and try him. This statement makes the game master furious, and he lunges at Adesali, preparing to punch him, but Adesali easily stops his punch with a single hand, mocking him for being such a weakling. He then counters attacks, and the game master activates his barrier as a last resort. But even then he gets slammed on the ground, and Adesali's repeated punches break the barrier, making the game master surrender and allow Adesali to enter the dungeon. While walking towards the dungeon gate, Adesali looks at the players surrounding him and finds that almost all of them are either low-level warriors or knights who haven't changed their professions. Furthermore, there are also high-level players who are there to lead the low-ranking ones. Just then, someone holds Adesali's hands and compliments him for defeating a level 35 player. Adesali looks at that person and instantly recognizes him. He starts off by introducing himself as Shio, the leader of the Death Spirit Guild. He then mentions that Adesali has the same combat abilities as Yanwu, the person who cleared Adesali's dungeon earlier. Adesali notices the elf standing beside him named Angier and recognizes her as well. Yanwu then questions why Adesali seems like he has a grudge against him, and Lu intervenes, saying that anyone who sees Yanwu's death spirit aura gets on his guard. Shio agrees and congratulates Lu, as the Miyamoto family has finally got another awakener. Adesali then asks Shio about the head of the Miyamoto family, who was eliminated by Adesali, to which he replies that the Miyamoto family head attracted Adesali's attention towards himself, allowing the 6 players to escape. However, it is clear that he's bullshitting, as Adesali doesn't remember such a thing happening. Following that, he introduces Yanwu to Adesali, and Yanwu suggests the two of them learn from each other. With that being said, Shio walks away while Adesali decides that he'd definitely eliminate him someday. Furthermore, Angier, who is a survivor of Adesali's race, is still alive, and Adesali plans to save her from Shio. Later, Lu asks Adesali if he has any grudge against Shio, and advises him to be careful of him. But Adesali reassures Lu that he is just over-concerned, not revealing the fact that he wants to eliminate him. Soon after, the Game Master leader Zhang appears, asking everyone to settle down. Lu advises Adesali to be careful, as only one person can change their profession, and everyone will be fighting each other, but Adesali believes that it is him who they should be wary of. Zhang further mentions that only warriors and knights can enter the dungeon, and that it doesn't restrict any challenge capacity. Most of the players start giving up after hearing this, making Adesali curious about it. This results in Zhang informing Adesali that no capacity restriction means that the difficulty is extremely tough. The last time such a dungeon appeared was Adesali's dungeon, which is not something a solo player can beat. However, Adesali couldn't care less and asks if he can enter the dungeon already, making Zhang wonder if he is not teaming up with someone. Adesali replies that he doesn't need any burdens, making the other players enraged. Yanwu finds it interesting to witness someone more arrogant than him, while Angier says that teaming up could be a bad choice, as there's only one profession change opportunity. Yanwu agrees with Angier, saying that everyone surrounding him is his enemy, and that one person is more than enough. After entering the dungeon, Adesali is teleported inside a volcano and figures that other players should be split up as well. Just then, he gets a notification to eliminate the boss, but there isn't any hint or clue as to where the boss is, and what's most important to him right now is to save Angier. Suddenly the ground starts shaking and a level 30 lava worm with a rather questionable shape emerges from the ground. Without wasting any time, the lava worm begins pouring lava on him, and Adesali easily manages to cut it in half, causing him to gain 50 Conqueror points. After the worm is eliminated, it self-destructs, which ends up injuring Adesali a little, but it isn't much of an issue as he fully heals himself using self-recovery. Following that, countless other lava worms begin to emerge from the ground, which makes Adesali a little pissed and excited at the same time. He dashes towards them and begins cutting all of them down while mocking those worms for being a bunch of weaklings. This battle gains him a bunch of Conqueror points, but he can't use them as the skills are locked. Soon after, he hears the sound of a battle and realizes that there are other players nearby. Turns out it is none other than Shanshan's party, which is currently fighting a lava golem. Shanshan activates his skill to protect his team from the golem and manages to restrict its movements. He then orders his team to attack before the golem can catch its breath. Adesali, who doesn't recognize Shanshan from afar, compliments him on being good. However, Shanshan's facial expressions change soon after as he begins eliminating his teammates with his card skills. The girl in his team questions what he's doing, to which he replies that he is trying to reduce his competitors. This results in her getting furious at him, and Shanshan mentions that her armors seem good, wondering if it can block his attacks. But before he can make a move, Adesali appears, praising the cards he has on him. Before Shanshan can even say anything, he gets sucker punched by Adesali, giving him a sense of nostalgia, and finally recognizes who Adesali is. Adesali then mentions that he has no other choice but to eliminate Shanshin as he wants the cards he is using. Shanshin mentions that he didn't have to look for Adesali as he came on his own, and Adesali asks if it is his last will. This statement makes Shanshin furious, and he takes out his card, summoning a shadow assassin. That shadow assassin dashes towards Adesali and is about to land an attack, making Shanshin think that he has already won, only for the shadow assassin to get obliterated by Adesali. Shanshin can't fathom what he just witnessed, and Adesali begins to mock him for summoning weaklings similar to himself. Shanshin begins making excuses, saying that it was only 1% of his true power, and Adesali asks him not to disappoint him like he has been disappointing his parents for years. With that being said, Shanshin activates the coffin and tries attacking Adesali with it, but he easily breaks the coffin as well. Following that, he activates Darkness Slash, but it doesn't have any effect on Adesali either. Adesali asks if Shanshin is even activating any of the skills, making him more furious as he begins activating many of his skills at once, but fails to even put a scratch on Adesali. This results in Shanshin panicking and wondering how Adesali can be this strong. Adesali tells Shanshin not to compare him with a zesty-looking guy like himself and appears before Shanshin, landing a brutal blow on him that sends him crashing into a boulder. At this point, Shanshin realizes that he only has 2 cards left which he was saving to fight the boss, and just when Adesali appears for another strike, Shanshin decides to use one of them called Darkness to send. This causes sudden darkness to envelop Adesali, making him look like a mere puppet. Shanshin begins laughing, mentioning how it takes away the target's 5 senses and that he can easily defeat him now. However, Adesali instantly recovers and calls Shanshin a clown for yapping aimlessly. To put an end to things, Adesali then puts his hand through Shanshin's disgusting-looking body, putting an end to his life. Afterward, he picks up Shanshin's card, and after taking a look at the last card Shanshin didn't use, Adesali realizes how powerful it was and that he could have lost if Shanshin used it. Just then, the girl comes running and thanks Adesali for saving her life, promising to give him a sneak peek after they get out. Adesali realizes that she's a witness and wonders if he should eliminate her when suddenly, a man dashes towards Adesali, yelling at him to stay away from the girl. Adesali panics after looking at his level that seems to be around 55. Luckily, the girl quickly takes Adesali's side, telling her uncle that he just saved her life. His uncle finds it hard to believe, but she elaborates that some other players attacked her and Adesali took care of them. After hearing her niece, the uncle apologizes for acting recklessly. Following that, the girl introduces herself as Jingjing and her uncle as Shui. Adesali also introduces himself and asks Shui about his profession. Shui replies that his real profession is astrologer, but he is able to change the details using a skill, but it's only a fake impression for show. Adesali finds it awesome that Shui can enter any dungeon by faking his profession. Furthermore, Jingjing invites Adesali to team up with them as it'll be easier, but he refuses, saying that he'd like to be alone. While walking away, Adesali realizes that he needs to be careful of the uncle, while Shui also notices that Adesali is pretty cunning for his age. He then decides to check Adesali's status, but his skill breaks, and the fact that he is unable to do so makes Shui decide to kill him later as he could be a threat. Elsewhere, a team of players are fighting a level 35 lava monster and panicking as they don't have any healer to heal their wounds. Just then, Yanwu along with Angier appears and he takes out his weapon to deal with the lava monster. Without wasting any time, he dashes straight toward the monster, making others think that he has a death wish or something. However, Yanwu is confident in his abilities and jumps on top of the monster, ending its life with a single strike, mentioning how a single hit is enough for such a weakling. The others can't believe he used such a skill, and Yanwu questions if they all saw that. This makes the players think that he might eliminate them for seeing his secret skill, and when he asks again, the players begin to promise not to say a word about it to anyone. Yanwu gets furious after hearing this, telling them to share his heroic fight with the others, making everyone realize that he is nothing but a show-off. With that being said, he begins walking away, advising those players to follow him, as well as they need to witness more of his heroic fights. At the same time, Adesali is hiding behind a rock and is able to watch Yanwu's skills and abilities. For the time being, he decides to follow them and wait for the best moment to strike, as this is what he does the best. Yanwu appears at a location where several underdressed goblins are protecting something. He rips out one of their heads and squishes it in front of them, causing those goblins to shit their pants a little. Following that, he bolts towards those goblins and uses his skill named Meteor Impact, eliminating them all by only his fists. Adesali, who is stalking him, seems surprised to see that Yanwu's skill and abilities are pretty similar to him, which could be troublesome, but at the very least, Yanwu is a complete moron who can't stop showing off. After taking care of the goblins, he reaches the seal that they were protecting when suddenly, a fireball strikes him. Apparently, it is the geezer goblin who threw, and he begins saying something to Yanwu. But Yanwu ends up eliminating that goblin as well, mentioning how he couldn't understand rat-ass of what he was saying. While Yanwu prepares to break the seal, Adesali understands those goblins' words, who told Yanwu that Hell's Master shouldn't be awakened. However, Yanwu ends up breaking the seal and everyone stares in silence as they witness countless green energies emerging from the ground. One of them almost catches Yanwu off guard, but he manages to get away and looks at the Death Spirit warhorse that appears out of the level. Before Yanwu can even figure out what that monster is, the horse begins sprinting towards him, and even though Yanwu tries to land a hit, the horse easily passes by without getting injured. This makes Yanwu wonder how it passed through his attack, but only Adesali is aware that the horse dodged his attack with an extremely fast speed. Following that, green energy begins emerging once again, and this time, a level 60 demon appears who calls itself the Hell's Master. Hell's Master prepares to fight the wimps in front of her, and attacks using her flames, and except for Adesali and the duo, everyone else loses their lives. Yanwu mentions how he underestimated the boss, and Angier tells him to get back up as they need to keep fighting. Hell's Master finds this combo of a human and demon quite interesting, and throws an attack towards them, and just when it's about to hit Angier, Adesali manages to hold it with his bare hand. This impresses the Hell's Master, and she asks for Adesali's name. Surprisingly this time, he introduces himself as Adesali, the Demon Lord, which brings tears in Angier's eyes, even though she finds it hard to believe that her pops is still alive. However, the way Adesali pats her head reminds her of the way he used to do it in the past, and she finally believes him, wondering why he is in a human's body. Adesali decides to tell her later, as they first need to eliminate the person who enslaved her. But Angier asks Adesali not to hurt Yanwu as he's not a bad person and has been protecting her for some time. This results in Yanwu also calling Adesali daddy, only to get smacked by him. After patiently waiting for their heartfelt conversation to end, Hell's Master attacks them once again, and the three of them manage to dodge, followed by them simultaneously attacking her. This pisses the Hell's Master, and she begins powering up, making Adesali realize the power gap between the two. Suddenly, she reappears behind Angier and shows her hand through Angier's body, making both Adesali and Yanwu enraged. Do you think Angier will survive this attack, or is it the end for her? Comment Demon if you'd like a part 2 of this series. As usual, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.